Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode of Breaking Barriers Now, where we are literally breaking barriers and helping people. We're just really here to save lives. We are here on a mission together to help anyone who is struggling in any area of their life that can relate to Sarah's story today. I want to make sure that I introduce my guest. She helps people with mindfulness and just recovering their life from what I can tell on her website. I can't wait for her to explain it a little bit better. Her name is Sarah Ariaudo. Ariaudo, we said that. Ariaudo. I love it. And she hails from California, yes?
Yes,
Yeah.
sunny
So
San
I'm in
Diego.
Florida and you're in, okay, awesome. You're in San Diego. I've been there before. So I'm in sunny Florida, you're in sunny San Diego. So for everybody up north and all those people that I've interviewed that were in Canada and things like that, I apologize. It's warm where we are. But anyway, Sarah, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jody. So glad to be here.
For sure, for sure. All right, so let's open it up. I want you to just introduce yourself, tell people what you do, and just a little bit about how, your upbringing and anything else that you want to tell people.
Great. So currently, I have a program that helps cancer patients with mindfulness. But how I got there was a very long journey in my own health and healing, both mentally and physically. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest,
Mm,
pretty much with a single mom. My parents were married for a while, but my dad was an abusive alcoholic. And
mm,
so I named myself the protector of the family at a very, very early age. And I didn't realize until I was much older the stress and the impact that it had on me. When I was in third grade, I was tested for a heart murmur, and it
mm,
turns out it was chronic high levels of stress that I was carrying.
mm,
Um, Later on in college, and beyond, I had some health issues where I had multiple exploratory surgeries and was put on strict diets and double doses of medication that I didn't even need that were for diabetics, even though I've never been diabetic. And again, it came back to high levels of chronic stress. But it was the normal for me. I had no
right,
idea I was so stressed out because I had been so stressed out from such an early age that it
right.
was just my norm. And then through self discovery, here I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And I can definitely relate to that too. I mean, just I grew up with an alcoholic, an abuser, things like that. So you really don't, as the child, realize what you're going through because you're just so used to it. Like that's your
Yeah.
norm, right? You don't know anything else. I'm grateful that I didn't have to, go through, endure those things that you did. Um, but that's part of your story. And I think that's
Yeah.
part of the impact that you're able to have now. And I do tell people, and I'm sure you probably do too, where these stress levels can literally take us down. It no longer just becomes, a mental thing. It's physical. It becomes physical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So at 8 years old, you're what, third grade, right? 8 years old, about
Yeah.
ish. Yeah.
Something like that. I know I have to
So
do the
you said you
math,
were
however
going
old they
in and
are.
out of, were they just not diagnosing it properly? Like what was going on with that?
So, when you're young, you're trying to explain what your symptoms are anyway, but
Mm,
you can't cognitively understand it.
right.
So, what was happening is around the same time every day, I would get chest pains. I couldn't breathe.
Mm,
It would feel like my heart was getting stuck in my ribs. And, when you're a kid telling adults that, they're like, okay, well, your heart's not getting stuck
right.
in your ribs. So, what's going on? They thought it was heartburn because it was after lunch. They did ultrasounds, they did
Mm,
blood tests, all of those things. And finally, they discovered that it was stress and that I was anxious about going home because it would happen
mm,
around the same time every day. And I was getting anxious about going home to
yeah.
who knows what would be there. Yeah.
Yeah. School's your outlet. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and just to kind of digress a little bit, during the time of COVID, right? We're in that time. We're still kind of there, hopefully coming out of it a little bit. But when there was kids that were having to stay at home, And you probably thought of this too, because this is where we were. Oh my God, some of these kids, they're not getting their outlet. What is happening? And honestly, we did see a lot of abuse. A lot of things were
Yeah.
going on during that time. So thank you for being vulnerable and talking about that. Sometimes it's a sensitive subject to talk about, but it's important. I think for even kids out there, just to know, they're not alone either. And you don't have to try to protect everyone because you're not going to be able to. And you're just a kid.
Yeah.
You need to find
Yeah.
protection.
I actually didn't realize until you said it right now. I've always loved school, always. And
Mm-hmm.
that's probably why, is because it was
Yeah.
my safe outlet. So that
Mm-hmm.
was very eye-opening that you just said that. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad. Yeah, and it took me a long time to figure that out too, where, I was always in school, always trying to go to school, always trying to do better. And I
Yeah.
thought of that one day too, where I was like, wow, this was my outlet.
Yeah.
It's crazy when you think of that.
Interesting. Yes. Thank
I
goodness that we had a productive outlet instead of
know.
something else. Yeah.
Well, there was I won't even go into that, but there was some unproductive things too.
Yeah.
But I want to continue with yours. So okay, so you're in, third grade. They're misdiagnosing everything. So what happened after that? Like, how did you even progress through that?
Yeah. So I didn't know how to really deal with stress then. I throughout the years have released a bit of perfectionism. I'm still a recovering
Yes.
perfectionist. Um, but I back then, I mean, I was the top of my class. I was a straight A student. I was voted, most popular and president of all the things. And then just slowly I realized that not everything needed to be so perfect. So
Mm-hmm.
I just stopped, like, I would fold toilet paper after I was done to make it perfect for the next person, like you do in a
Mm.
hotel.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. So I
Right.
slowly released some of those things, which probably helped alleviate some of the stress. But I still didn't really know how to cope with stress.
Mm.
Luckily, you get into grade school, and we had sports teams that were affiliated with the school. So you would go to school and then you would just stay after and have practice. So
Mm.
I think having that physical outlet actually helped. I didn't realize it, but I think it helped more than what I realized even back then. But it really
Yes.
wasn't until post college that I had to start making lifestyle changes because of the impact of stress on my health. In college, of course, I wasn't an alcoholic, but I certainly drank like I was trying to be,
Yes. It's okay.
as
I've
many
been
people
there.
do.
Yes.
Um, and I didn't realize it at the time, but it was really to escape being alone with my thoughts
Mhm.
and dealing with my things. So
Yeah.
I drank and partied, and I was always the friend that people went to for advice because I was rocking it. I was still
Yeah.
president of my class. I was still getting straight A's and on
Oh,
the on
wow.
the honor roll. So I appeared to have my stuff together, and so
Yeah.
I was the go-to person. And I loved it because that meant I didn't have to deal with my own baggage. I could help everybody with theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an eye-opening place to be. And I'm
Yes.
glad that you figured that out early on in your life, because
Yeah.
you guys don't wait until you're in your 40s, because that's what happened with me. And
Yeah.
if you can begin to realize that earlier in life, then you're so much farther ahead, you know.
Yeah.
So, what was your, because I think we all have kind of like that awakening point, right? Like, what was your wake up call?
Um, it really was the health issues post college. So suddenly I didn't have a cycle for 18 months.
Mm,
Nothing else had changed, that it just
wow.
disappeared. And so after 3 exploratory surgeries and the multiple medications and cutting
Oh
everything
my
out of my
gosh.
diet, except for vegetables,
Right?
it, I got fed up and I realized that the doctors were doing everything that they could to try to figure out what was going on with me, but what was I doing? I mean, I was following the diet and I was
Mm,
taking the medication, but I wasn't changing my lifestyle. And so I started getting into yoga and mindfulness. I still resisted meditation back then. I know we get
Yes.
angry about it, but I started doing mindfulness and yoga and just being gentler on my body and
Mm.
giving myself more grace, not pushing to the extreme. I always like the extreme sports and kickboxing and all those things,
Yeah.
push, 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 which was just stressing my body out more. And when I
Mhm.
started shifting to adapting more gentle exercises and allowing for more space to grow and just be still in my life, then it started suddenly everything came back. I didn't need any medications. They couldn't find anything with the surgeries anyway. And I was in the best health that I had been in after I learned to manage my stress better.
Wow. So how old were you when that kind of happened?
Uh, yeah. So when my health finally turned around, I was 28 or 29.
Okay.
Um, but
Wow.
it had been probably a 3 or 4 year journey for the really severe health issues. But it wasn't until something that I couldn't deny anymore. You can be in
Right.
denial and you can drink it away or distract yourself. But when you just suddenly don't have a cycle for absolutely no reason, and I wasn't pregnant, right? It was a year and a
Right.
half. There was no denying that. So I had to face it and actually take action and make adjustments.
Yeah.
I also started standing up for myself and prioritizing my health, which I never had. I'd never
Mm.
really prioritized myself because, as I mentioned at an early age, I designated myself as the protector. So I looked out for everyone
Mhm.
else. But because I couldn't deal with the stress and the physical stress on my body that my job was requiring, I had to make a change. And so I spoke with my boss and actually shifted roles within the company so that I wasn't traveling 10 or 11 out of every 12 weeks. I mean, that
Mm.
alone is hard on your body and getting into a routine and having different time zones. So
Yes.
making that shift was a big emotional move for me to actually stand up for myself and to put myself and my health first. It was a big step.
Wow. Yeah. It is. Let's talk a little bit because you touched on something that I actually had this conversation really recently where I was like, yeah, I did not meditate.
Yeah.
I'm like a very, for me to even sit down this long is really good. It's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
And so I was always kind of like, in the military, I worked outside, I was always this go, go, go person, always. And so to learn how to sit still was very difficult for me. But I heard that it helped. And so I said, okay, I was in that journey as well, where it was like, okay, well, they say that this is helping. I literally start with 1 minute. That's how I started. I was like, okay, if I could just sit still for 1 minute, okay, I'm just going to start there. And I did. So let's talk about how you started that because you touched on it. You were like the meditation, and you kind of went through that. But how did you start implementing that into your life and how does that look for you?
So I really have to credit it to yoga because that was the first time I didn't like yoga either because I couldn't sit still. And,
Yes.
when you're a high performer and busy doing all the things, it's like, okay, I'm wasting my time. This is really slow.
That's
Um, but I felt so good afterwards and I just felt
yeah.
so calm and peaceful. So years later, I had done mindfulness, right? So the mindfulness is awareness of now, it's being in the present. And people often confuse mindfulness and meditation. So I just want to make that distinction
Yes.
for people because it is different. So if you struggle, start with 1 minute and being in the now, just being aware. How does your body feel? Close your eyes and just, how do you feel? That's
Right.
being mindful. And so that was a good introduction and baby steps. Meditation really takes you deeper. And the reason that I really fought it was because I was under the impression that you had to clear your mind, be in complete silence, and sit
Yes.
there for 45 minutes
Same
every
here.
day. Yeah,
Yes.
who has time for that? You have stuff to do. And who can clear their mind? I can't
And
stop clearing my
that's why it
mind,
took me so long too. That's funny.
Yeah. So after I realized that it wasn't about stopping your thoughts and clearing your mind, and it didn't have to be in a rigid certain position for 45 minutes, I started with 5 minutes, and I would
Mhm.
just be quiet. And I found a method that works for me. I call it lazy girl meditation because I didn't want to add another thing that I had to do on my plate. It just felt like more stress, which is
Yes.
counterproductive. So I just decided I'm going to commit to myself. I'm yet again going to prioritize myself and my health. I've read all the benefits that meditation can bring. I just
Mhm.
need to do it. So I committed to 5 minutes a day, being quiet and not trying to control or perfect everything. It's not going
Mm.
to be silent in my house. I know this. I can't clear my mind. I know this. So just accepting things for the way they are and then allowing myself to experience whatever it is that I'm experiencing. And
Mm.
that shift made room for me to progress and commit more thoroughly to meditation. So now I do
Mhm.
15 to 20 minutes a day. And same thing, I just allow myself to experience. And, if I need another one, if I'm feeling stressed, I'll pop in and do another, 5-10 minute meditation in the afternoon or something, but just not judging or trying to be perfect at it. Because what I realized is no one cares if you're perfect at meditation. No one cares what type of meditation you're doing. They care if
Exactly.
you're creative and kind and a good person. And it really does help me to be a better person or a better version of myself.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell people that I usually go to the gym early in the morning, and when I see people, I've already done this, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so now when I'm going there, for the most part, of course, nothing's 100%, but usually by the time I get in there, I'm just a better version of myself, right? And so I'm able to uplift people and stuff like that. And I had someone comment on that one time, and I said, "Oh, you have no idea what I had to do at the house before I got here," you know. But I
Yes.
love what you said about the meditation thing because, like, for me, I'm a writer. I've been a writer since I was a kid. I started implementing writing into my meditation, right? But I thought, like you said, I thought, oh, well, that's counterproductive because no, but writing for me is not. Writing is like, it's flowing of thoughts, flowing of creativity. Writing has always been peace to me. So now, if you're not a writer, that's probably not going to resonate to you. But but if you're somebody when all the things were going on in my life when I was younger, writing is what helped me get through it. So writing has been my peace. So when I started meditating, I would write, and now I still write. So every morning I'm writing, I'm writing, I'm writing. You know, and so I love what you said about that because meditation can look different for each person.
You're so right. And I think that's a really important point for people to understand is exactly what you said. It Your version may be different than someone else's, but all that matters is that it works for you. All that
Mm-hmm.
matters is that it supports you in being your best self. I mean, that's really all that matters. It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
a birth plan. Everybody's all judgy and
Yeah.
opinionated about what you're going to do, but then after the baby comes, no one ever asks you again. So who cares what the plan is as long as it works and it supports you?
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit because you support cancer survivors, things like that. Like, what got you into that?
Yeah. So at an early age, I knew that I wanted to help people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so healthcare just seemed to be the natural route. In my hometown, people either knew that you were a doctor or a nurse. That's it. But I saw that they were all burnt out
Mm-hmm.
and overworked. So I knew I didn't want to be a nurse. I didn't think I could afford to go to school to be a doctor. So I was researching other things that I could do. And when I came across radiation therapy, which is helping cancer patients,
Mm-hmm.
I just felt this pull. Who better could I serve than people going through such a traumatic and life-changing experience? And
Mm-hmm.
that was part of my desire to save everyone too from, childhood. Everything is be the saver,
Yes.
be the
Same.
fixer.
I'm telling you, we could probably talk about this for hours. Yes.
Yeah. So it was a great fit and I really loved it. I really loved the patient interactions. And looking back, I was so inspired by people, but it didn't really register back then.
Mhm.
It's life changing. And it's like, oh my gosh, those were epiphanies that I can reflect on now. But at the time, you're young, you're 19,
Mhm.
20, 21. Um, so it just didn't register how great of an impact it was. But I, I had two women, if I can tell the story,
Mhm.
two women that I treated 20 years ago. I remember it like it's yesterday. And that interaction really shaped what I'm doing today. So
Mhm.
at the same time, I was treating a woman in her mid 40s. She had an aggressive primary brain tumor, glioblastoma multiforme. It's very long, primary brain cancer. But she would come in every day, whether she was carried in by her husband in a wheelchair or walking. It varied depending on
Mhm.
how she felt. And she had a smile on her face every day. Radiation treatments are typically 5 days a week for
Mhm.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
And she finished her treatments. That prognosis was not good. Most of us didn't think she would make it through her treatments, but she came
Mm.
for her year follow-up. She was just so inspiring and so happy, and just always had something to be grateful for. She would always
Mm.
share what she was grateful for that day. At the same time, I was treating a woman in her late 40s. So they're about 6 years age difference.
Mhm.
And that woman had in situ breast cancer, which is essentially stage 0. She basically was free of cancer. They had resected the tumor.
Okay.
But to be sure that they didn't leave any cells, they prescribed radiation. She was so anxious and allowed the stories in her head to control her that she didn't finish her treatment. She was admitted to the ER 6 times in the 4 weeks that she did attend treatment. She was prescribed extremely high doses of anti-anxiety medication.
Mhm.
Radiation machines give a loud beep to know that the machine's on. And she had us turn up the music so loud we couldn't even hear the machine. We'd have to watch the light to make sure it was still on and
Oh my
working,
goodness. Wow.
um, because she just let herself be controlled. And so, at the time, I was in my early 20s. I'm like, okay, gosh, mindset makes a difference. But it didn't really register to me. I hadn't yet gone through my health issues. I hadn't really had those awakenings, if you will, to how great mindset is in your outcomes and in your life, whether it be mental or physical health.
Mhm.
It didn't really register until I had my own health issues years later, when I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, I can either really be down and I can, drink my sorrows away and then feel like crap because I'm drinking, and then drink because I feel like crap and
Right.
keep, with these health issues, or I can shift and try to figure out what's going on and be proactive. And that's when I remembered the two ladies. I'm like, wow, what a difference the mindset made. The
Mm.
lady that had stage 4 that we didn't think would survive came to her year follow-up, and the lady that was basically fine didn't even finish treatment because she
Mm.
was so sick. So it
Wow.
just it it's interesting how people touch your lives and you don't realize the full impact
Mm.
until later. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And that's so true. I think I will say personally, the more I worked on my journey and worked on myself, I started noticing things about other people. And of course, I don't judge anybody because, hey, I was there. I was
Yeah.
that. I was reactive. I was, because I saw that you wrote about proactive, reactive. I wrote about
Yeah.
that too. And that's one of the things where it's like, it's that power of choice. I always say the power of choice. We all have a choice. And it's the decisions that we make that is going to, that's the outcome that we received. And so it's really just kind of stepping back, and that was one of probably the hardest things for me to do, was to pull myself back and analyze it first and kind of just
Yeah.
take a deep breath before I reacted. And like I said, nothing's 100%. I'm still a work in progress, just like all of us, right? But it's interesting how those two women, like you said, how different their stories were, but how much that showed you.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then years later, when I finally found meditation and allowed that to come into my life, it helped me with another realm of health issues. I had had a baby and was stressed and not sleeping, all the things that come
Mm.
with, you know, newborns.
Yes.
And I just couldn't shed the weight. I was healthy, I was eating healthy, I was doing all the things, but
Mm.
I was a 30-pound bigger version of myself. And when I started implementing meditation, the weight came off. I mean, I changed what I was
Wow.
eating a little bit, but
Right.
it was really the stress and lack of sleep and all of the hormonal changes that come with that, that weren't, they were irregular. And so my
Mm.
body didn't know how to self-regulate or process because I wasn't supporting it in the right way. And when I had that experience, again, I was reminded of those two women. And I thought, if I can have this profound of an effect, losing the 30 pounds that I've been working on for 4 years, just by shifting a few things, starting with 5 minutes a day of meditation, what can it do to benefit people that are dealing with a chronic illness, that are
Yeah.
suffering from cancer, that feel like their life is being controlled, that it's been, hijacked? What can they do to have the power of choice and take some control back? And so that's why I married my passion for the mindfulness and the healing properties of that, as well as the cancer treatment. So I created
Mm.
that program to help facilitate them while they're going through this journey, both, during their treatment and then afterwards, so that they can
Mm.
have the power of choice and be healthy the rest of their lives.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I love it. I love it. I like you so much already. We are definitely going to stay connected. So I wanted to ask this: if someone is out there and they're listening to you and they're like, you know what, or maybe they're a nurse or a doctor, because yes, we've all seen. I've actually almost gone both routes, so now I know why I didn't, because the last thing I needed to add in my life was more stress. But we've all seen them, right? So maybe they want to get into what you're doing. How did that process look for you? Was there any like certain credentials you had to have to work with? Because these are cancer patients, or is this something that you always did as an independent person? Like, what did that look like for you?
Are you talking about being the radiation therapist, or are you talking about the mindful aspect?
Okay. So you are actually a radiation therapist.
Yeah, so I did go to
Okay.
college for
Okay.
radiation therapy, which,
Okay.
yeah, for those that don't know what
That's
it
the key
is,
right there. Yes.
yes,
Okay. That's
not a
almost.
nurse, not a doctor, but
Okay.
there's a vast array of healthcare
Yes.
providers in between. And I did go
Love
to
it.
school at the
Okay.
University of Minnesota for that. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So that's kind of how you got into that part. Okay. But like,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So if we go into kind of the mindfulness and stuff, is that something that you normally will work with them outside of, the hospital, or do you actually still go into the hospital and do that?
Yeah. So I do it independently, and I'm
Okay.
so happy that healthcare in general, I think really the pandemic has helped us awaken to this, that there is more than just the physical body that we're treating. We really need to get the root of the cause, first of all,
Hmm.
not just put a band-aid over it and throw medication at it, but really find
Right.
out what the root is, and then also address the mental and emotional well-being as well as the physical that we're treating.
Yeah.
So healthcare is definitely shifting more and being more open to mindfulness techniques as a synergistic or collaborative treatment for the patient. I
Mm.
really don't recommend replacing Western medicine with the
Right.
holistic approach. I really think that there's benefit to doing both,
Hmm.
because Western medicine wouldn't exist if there wasn't something to it. But,
That is true.
um, you know, being mindful really helps people to be aware of what's working and what's not. And
Yeah.
so, just using my own health journey as an example, the doctors were doing the surgeries and couldn't find anything. They were giving me medications based on the symptoms I was having, but it wasn't working. But they didn't know. It was up to me to pay attention to how I was feeling. Was this working? Was I feeling better? Was I feeling worse? And then
Hmm.
communicate that. And I think that's a really important piece of the mindfulness. Is it's not a magic wand. You're not going to be happy all the time. It's not going to cure you from all these ailments. What it does is allows you to pay attention to what's working and what's not, to pay
Hmm.
attention to how you feel, and then be less triggered or less reactive, so that you can be clear and communicate with your providers of what is the path that's right for you. They're reading textbooks, they're going off of research, but you're
Right.
an individual. And so you have to do your part in how is this affecting you as that person, not the masses. So I think
Mhm.
it's a really good synergy to have the two. And it really does benefit the healthcare team because, again, they're doing their best, but they
Mhm.
can't account for every single individual. They have to go with what works for the majority. And then you need to communicate if it's also working for you. But
Yeah.
for that piece, I've gotten a lot of certifications outside of radiation therapy. So I'm a
Mm.
certified yoga instructor and meditation teacher and
Love
all of
it.
those things now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, thank you for opening up about, the things that you went through. I think we were kind of talking about this before we actually started recording was, it's the stuff that we go through, our story that is why we do what we do, right? That's
Yes.
what
Yeah.
ignites that passion. So I really appreciate you opening up to that. Do you ever have, when you talk to people, do you ever have it to where like people are just not, they don't want to do, and we've been there, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what is some, and I don't want you to go into too detail, but what is like some advice that you give people on, why this is important or why they should implement it into their lives?
Yeah. That is a really great question, Jody. What I've found, because I'm one of those people that when I find something, I tell everybody about it. And
Hmm.
I get very passionate. So I'm
Yes.
maybe sometimes a little in your face about it.
Yes.
Right.
Same
There's the
here.
so what I still need to practice and remind myself is sharing my story, but not trying to force my story onto someone else. And what I mean by
Yeah.
that is if people ask, oh gosh, how did you lose all that weight? Because they saw me in my more to love stage, or they would see me be more stressed or more reactive, or whatever
Hmm.
the version of me that they saw was. If they're curious about my journey and what I do now, I happily share it. I don't try to get them to do it, but I share what worked for me.
Right.
And if they're interested and if they're ready, they'll ask more probing questions that then gives me the permission to share more and more details with them. What I've found is that just because it worked for me and I'm excited about it and I can see that it would work for someone else, it doesn't mean that they're ready. And
Yes.
until someone is ready, it doesn't matter if you've got the magic wand or not. They're not they're not ready to receive. And
Yeah.
so you can't force people. You really need to accept them where they are
Yeah.
and just share what worked for you when they ask, and then be there when they are ready. Be that
Yeah.
support when they are. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
that
great
is
question.
amazing. No, that was really good, and I think you answered it probably in a similar way that I would answer it now. But of course,
Yeah.
I had to learn that, because I'm
Yes.
also very passionate, and it's like, but I know this would work, right? Like I get very,
Yes.
I'm like, but you're, especially when someone is like diabetic or they're dealing with a chronic illness or something. But I have it. I know. I got it. I know it. I know it can help you. But not everybody wants it, and so it is very difficult. So I appreciate that you shared that because that is something that I've also had to really work on.
Yeah.
And what you said at the end though, being there still. So I always
Yeah.
tell people this might not be the right time for you, and Lord knows it was not always the right time for me either. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'll be here when you're ready.
Yeah.
So I love that you said that.
Yeah, I have to remind myself of how when I would have a visceral reaction to the meditate, when people are like, "Oh, just meditate on it, just meditate on it," and I would get like inside, I could
Yes.
feel this irritation because I'm like, I can't clear my mind. 45 minutes, it's not accessible.
Yes.
I can't. And so when I'm like ready to, bombard you with all the excitement and things that will work, I try to remind myself, okay, you weren't ready to meditate and you had to
Mm-hmm.
find it in your own time. They need to find their own journey, and then when they're ready, be there to share the resources. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And it's just tools, like what
Yeah.
you give, like you were saying that too. It's not everything that you and I do is going to work for everyone else. We're just sharing what worked for us, and then you got to figure out how to make it work for your life.
Yes,
And if you need some
exactly.
accountability, hey, that's what we're here for, you know.
Yes.
So I appreciate that you said that. So we talked a little bit about the fact that when this show comes out on the podcast, that it's going to be around Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So is there anything that you want to share with the listeners when it comes to that? Because I know that's a mission that I love to support too. I've had a lot of friends. Actually, just had one recently pass away with stage 4 cancer, my age. I'll be 44 here in a couple months, but so what is some things that you want to share about that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested, I feel like everyone knows someone that's battling cancer, and whether it's yourself or a family member
Mm-hmm.
or a friend. So if you want to get involved, tell your cancer centers about the program. I am in the process of working with cancer centers. My goal is really to get the resource, the program, and the guidebook into as many cancer centers as possible. My goal for 2022 is to touch 1% of people diagnosed, newly
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed each year. 1.8 million people are newly diagnosed every year in the US. So that's 20,000 people I'm hoping to touch by the end of the year. But the more
Yes.
that healthcare providers hear about the need, they're busy doing all of their things and they
Mm-hmm.
want to support you, but they may not have the bandwidth. So the more
Right.
you talk about your journey and what you need to feel supported, the more open they're going to be to finding these resources and helping ensure that they're accessible to patients. So talk about it. If you want to support a family or friend, the guidebook is on Amazon. I think you do have to search my name for some reason. We're working on fixing that. It'll be under
Right.
cancer journey, but Sarah Ariaudo, if you type that into Amazon, you can find the guidebook and then the course
Awesome.
from there. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, we're gonna wrap this up. Unfortunately, I really do feel like we could have a great conversation for hours. So maybe we'll have to do this again or just offline. But
Yes, definitely.
I do want to say thank you again for showing up and just sharing a portion of your journey. I really do pray that this helps someone out there. I always say if we can just reach one, right? If we can just
Yes.
reach one, and maybe they can share it with someone else, and that's how it trickles down, right? So thank you for
Absolutely.
opening up. Thank you for being vulnerable. You guys, look, we all have a story, and whatever your story is, you're not alone. So please, if you're in that space where you just feel like you have nothing left, we've all been there. You're not alone. Please reach out to someone, contact someone, ask for help. You got two people here that you can reach out to, and just do that. Be willing to do that. You are not alone. And that's why I'd like this podcast, we're building a community right now. And so there's going to be some interaction and things like that. And people can post anonymously. And there's a lot that's going to be able to come about. And so again, I'm grateful that you came on today. Let's go ahead and tell people what's the best way to contact you? What's the best way to reach you?
Sure. So, Mindful Based Healing is the website that you can find all things cancer, resources, workplace wellness. And then, if you're interested in trying meditation, if you were like Jody and I, where it didn't seem accessible, but you're ready to give it a go, you can go to lazygirlmeditation.com.
I love
And
it.
I offer a freebie of how to meditate along with a little ebook to walk you through it. So you can check that out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you have any final words, just any words of encouragement or anything that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yes, thank you. Yes, your story does not define you. It's just a
Mm,
chapter in your life, and you really do have the power to choose. You might be embarrassed or ashamed of where you came from, but that's not your fault, and that's not who you are. You get to choose who you are. So
yes.
just go for it. And like Jody said, you're not alone.
Yeah.
You have support.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And we do get to choose who we are. And again, that's something that I didn't learn until way later in life. We get to
Yes, we are not
choose.
taught that in school.
We're not taught that in school. They still don't teach that in school. We're taught how to be robots. We're taught how to follow everyone else. We're taught how to, be protectors and fix everything and save everyone. And at the end of the day, we're not saving ourselves. So, you guys, just remember, you have to take care of self. You have to make sure that you're not pouring from an empty cup, because Lord knows that doesn't get us anywhere. And you also have to know you have to find your tribe. You have to find your people that are going to support you in those hard times, because we're not meant to do life alone. So thank you again, Sarah, for being here today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, this has been another episode of Breaking Barriers Now. I am just truly grateful for where this is going. I'm blown away. Sometimes I just sit and meditate in amazement. I mean, it's interesting, because I always say, I didn't come up with all these ideas, because had I come up with it, they would have been a lot more limited than what they are right now. But sometimes we just have to go with things, and not try to figure it all out, because sometimes we're not going to be able to figure it all out. But we just have to allow ourselves to be led and see where things go, and we get to meet great, amazing people. And we get to support people along the way. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you go subscribe and follow to the podcast. Go check out Sarah's website and make sure you stay in touch with her. And also share this with anyone you know that might need to hear it. Thank you again for tuning in. This has been another episode, and I'm your host, Jody Watkins. Stay blessed.